Real dancing, huh?
Welcome to Inside the Rookery, or Välkommen till vår livestream. Vi är glada att du är här, Henrik. Sorry about that. I just felt the need to welcome you in badly accented Swedish.
Super good.
So tonight there's me, and I'm joined by other Rooks, Andy Law and Mark Gibbons. The most arty of all the artists, Henrik Rosenborg. To discuss imagining the fantastic. So welcome to everyone. I have scooped up all your questions from the Discord, but if anyone has any questions or comments as we go along, as always, put them in the chat and I will keep an eye on it. Hi Henrik.
Hi.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. I'm really excited about this actually.
So without further ado, we shall pop on to the first question, just taking a moment to come up, which is from Julius. When creating a fantastical element, straight in there with the fantasy, be it pure concept or illustrating one, where do you start? What's the first thing you personally like to figure and flesh out?
Okay, should I start?
Go for it. You are the guest.
I think I usually start with like what's going to be in the center. So like if it's a character, I usually start with the face, the thing you want to look at first, and I make sure that one is interesting, and then I feel that the rest of it builds itself basically based on what the face of the character is. So yeah, that's where I start usually.
What about you, Mark?
Interesting. Yeah, it's kind of like I honestly don't start until I know what it is I want to do. So I try to avoid ever sitting down with a blank sheet of paper in front of me going, well, I guess I better start. I usually spend a couple of days charging up the subconscious, just letting that percolate on an idea. So by the time I come to draw it, I know what to do. And unlike Henrik, I tend to start with the silhouette, the sort of the overall shape, and then I'll kind of go in and noodle on the details. Plus, I'm crap at drawing faces, so if I started with faces, it really put me off.
What about you, Andy? When you are mapping the fantastic, do you?
Mapping! I wasn't going to answer that. Oh, now you've completely thrown me. I had a whole answer prepped.
Did you? Okay, well, answer whatever.
No, it's okay. Let's go to maps.
Be nice to hear about. Do you
fine.
think about the concept first, or do you think about the rough sketch of the map first?
Yes, actually, with mapping is all about shapes inside shapes and ensuring that they look balanced. If you look at a lot of fantasy maps, they tend to be heavy on one side or another side because they've often been created by a writer initially, and the writer is concerned about their narrative, which often runs through the very center or one little corner of it, leaving large chunks of it very poorly expressed or put together. I'll give a single example of that. In the Warhammer world, almost everything is in the center of the empire. And then when you look up towards the peripheries in the north, in Nordland or anything similar at the top of the empire, it was very, very poorly realized to the beginning, at the point of all the sensible coastline where people would put ports isn't used. It just isn't. And over the course of time, writers have tried to justify that through one course or another. And as somebody who comes in to then try and map those things, you've got to try and make sense of it all. So for me, first thing is primary shapes and where they go. And that will leave me natural spaces where I can do things like add compasses or anything similar. And the last part, which is particularly important, is the theme of whatever the setting is. So if it's a very dark setting, you've got to make sure that that's translated. If it's a very bright one with little happy fairies on it, you've got to put little happy fairies around the border or anything similar. But they're all the incidental details that often come afterwards. At the very beginning, the first thing is the core shapes.
Thanks. So Soon TM asks, have you ever had an art brief that has left you shaking your head in puzzlement? I recall a Cthulhu artist, not sure which project it was for, but moaning being asked to illustrate some of the weirder stuff when the description Lovecraft gave was it was basically essentially indescribable. And just a warning, Andy, I will come to you at the end to flip it on its head and ask, as someone who writes an art order, have you ever had stuff back that you're just like, that wasn't what I ordered? So yeah, have you ever had an art brief that's left you shaking your head in puzzlement? Henrik?
I'll pull back.
Usually not, because like usually if they ask for something that's a bit weird or that's like hard to imagine, that's like sort of what I do, you know, since I So it's pretty good for me when someone is like. But I think mainly the problem when I have a problem with the brief is when they're asking too much. Hey, can you have a hero and a dragon and a city and the moon and you know, and you're like, no, we can't do this. Like it's too much. Or if they say, hey, can you add more yellow when you're 50% into the piece? You're like, why? Why do you want to? Like stuff like that, I have problems with. But you know, so no, I can't recall any brief that's been specifically to, yeah.
No, I don't. No, I don't think I've ever had a brief that puzzled me that way. I think the one thing that you get that makes you roll your eyes a little bit is when a client says, I don't know what I want, but I'll know it when I see it.
People really say that?
Helpful. They absolutely do, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's a little bit strange. Yeah, sometimes the sort of the loosest brief, just do your thing, just do what you do, is a warning sign almost, because I guarantee they won't like what it is that you do. So it's much nicer to get to work with a client who absolutely knows what they want and can give you some great little pointers. So that's usually where you end up with the happiest result. You know, I've done concept art for people, and they've decided that halfway through, oh no, this is not what we want at all, and I've sort of pulled the plug. And I'm thinking, well, I'm still in the middle of the concept process. That's it's iterative. You know, we go back every time. It's the waves washing up the beach, getting a little bit higher, getting a little bit closer to what you want. So it's occasionally frustrating if a client turns around and says, oh no, we're just going to take that back in house now. We decided, we don't want to. And then you see the finished thing, and you go, that's pretty much what I do. So we could have got there anyway, really. But never had something that really, really baffled me completely. No, that would be a challenge.
So I'm not going to answer what Lindsay told me to answer, because I've got something else I'm going to answer, and that is almost exactly what Mark was discussing. When you get a client who says, "Oh, I think I want this," and you didn't hear the word "think." So you then produce exactly what was asked for. You pass it over, and they go, actually, that's not what I want. What I want is this. And the shifting goalpost. If we're in a shifting goalpost position, something has gone seriously wrong. I've had that happen in one very big example, which I won't go into, other than it was a deeply frustrating process. And sometimes, particularly because I've been on the other side, sometimes it's with the artist, and sometimes it's very much with the person who's commissioning the art where the issue lies, because the artist might not be suitable to a piece, for example, and they're just not quite got it right. And that's sometimes going to be the case. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. You just work through it, get it sorted, and then move on. But when you are not the problem and you're nailing each step as you go, and each step they decide isn't what they want, that's a horrendous place to be in. And then eventually they get what they want because they didn't know what it was in the first place, or you just cry and give up. I've never given up yet, but I have definitely wanted to once.
That's fair.
Yeah, I've walked away from a couple of jobs just because it got to the point where I despite the sunk cost, it's like, this is just going to go on and on forever, and I'm better to burn that particular bridge and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I will say that the shifting over to digital art has made things a lot more forgiving, because if you do have a client that turns around and wants some dramatic change and you painted it all in Photoshop, it's like, oh, that's fine. I can make that character's head half the size it was. Whereas if that was a painting, it's, oh my God, no. But just cut it out, shrink it down, paint in a bit more background, away you go. Change the color on something, easy. Yeah. Henrik, what's your working method for that? Are you traditional, digital, or mix of the both?
Digital.
Yeah.
It certainly does help to make changes.
Yeah, I mean, I just started with that because it's so convenient, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Control Z. Whoa.
Yeah. So good.
I have found myself reaching for the Control Z when I'm drawing something with pencil.
Me too.
I mean, like,
yeah.
I try and copy and paste stuff. Like if I'm doing a form for the kids or something, I try and copy and paste the information like from a previous form
With
onto
your,
the.
with
I
your,
don't
with your
even know.
magic.
Yeah, like I
Did
don't
it
know
work?
what I'm trying to do. Control X. No, it's not working. So Killer Chandra asks, why make fantasy things and not real world things? What's the attraction of the weird and the wonderful?
I mean,
Good question.
the simple answer for me is just because they don't exist. Like, and on a personal level, I just enjoy going on a little journey, you know, in something that doesn't exist, and I don't know where it's gonna go. And my process is a lot like that. It's a lot of, you know, a lot of just focusing on shapes and colors, and I don't know exactly where I'm gonna end up at the end of it. So it's, you know, it's just like a really fun adventure, really, for me.
Yeah, agreed. Same here. It's that creating something that didn't exist before you started, you know, and particularly if it's something that develops into a sort of a lore, a background, a fantasy that other people get to play in. That's amazing to have that. It's quite a privilege to be able to get to do that. So yeah, I've never been one for painting still lives, bowls of fruit and things like that. It's always been, can I make the fruit a goblin fruit? Can I make it weird and can it crawl out of the fruit bowl and a bite?
Now we're talking.
You know, that's what I want to do.
When did you know you wanted to be an artist? Like, were you one of those kids like Andy Law was, who just drew and drew and drew and drew?
Not really, no. I realized, I think I was 22 or something, and I was playing World of Warcraft, and I didn't have a job, and I was like, well, I got to do something with my life. And then I figured, what am I decent at? And I was, you know, I had some sort of affinity for drawing, so I just went for that, and here we are, like 10 years later or something.
Interestingly, if you liked World of Warcraft, then you probably encountered quite a lot of Mark's work.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I was for about 4 years. I was the only full-time concept artist on WoW. So from Wrath of the Lich King to Mr. Pandaria, although plenty of other very, very talented artists in the WoW team sort of do double duty. They'll do concept art and texture painting or animation or character design. But I was the only one that was just scribbling away frantically for 4 years.
wow.
Populating the World of Warcraft. Yeah, so it's quite the discipline to go in every day, you know, to do your full day's work. Just draw stuff. Got to get stuff done. Because there's a massive amount of stuff to generate. Yeah. It's a good training ground for sort of a disciplined approach. Should you go freelance again afterwards, you know, you get into the habit of being creative every day when you don't always feel, you know, so inclined. You power through those sort of weird little creative blocks you sometimes get.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of when I knew I wanted to be an artist, my mum tells me I wanted to be a vet until I found out how you took a cow's temperature.
Good answer.
That's a good answer.
So then, I do remember in one class in school where the teacher was just going around asking people what they wanted to do for a living, and most people just didn't have any particular idea, or you know, it was I want to be a fireman, or I want to be a lawyer or a doctor or something. And I said, I want to do special effects in films like Ray Harryhausen. And this was before video games had sort of become a thing, and that's what I could have done as well. So I sort of ended up where I wanted to go. So again, once I got the vet thing and the cow's bums out of my head, then it was very much art was where I saw myself.
I mean, how many cow bums did you depict at a later date, though? Don't answer that. No, seriously, don't answer that.
With a thermometer up it.
I'm going to answer this question from quite a different angle, since I have an opportunity to do so. One of the joys of being part of a writing team that is then going to have their work turned into art is being part of that process, where you create something that you think is really distinct. It may be visually exciting in your own mind. It may be something that has some really clever metaphors laced in. It may be something that's completely out there and wild, and then passing that over to somebody else and saying, here's my baby, what are you going to grow it into? And then seeing what the art team does, and then watching an idea mature often far beyond your initial conception. And I think that's, in particular for our nice little team that we've got here in the Rookery, it's one of the things that I've enjoyed most is watching some words turn into some art, and then watching that art go back and turn the words into something hopefully even more, which is just so much fun. Where in previous jobs, when I was on writing teams, it tended to be the writer's word was law. And then the art came in afterwards, and they had a very fixed paradigm around which to work that was established, and they were illustrating the words that were already in place. And whilst there is advantages to that in terms of just getting it out there, in terms of the actual creative process, I found the way we've been doing it so much more fulfilling.
So awesome.
So
yeah, it is.
The Rang du Farg. I've never said that name. I've like purposely avoided it on previous streams because how absurd to even pronounce that. I'm like, somebody's asking a question. Some guy, some girl, whatever. There's been a Twitter controversy. Now I just can't speak.
No, you can't speak.
Controversy about artists subjecting to people using their art in private RPG games because the art is personal to them and the commissioner. Where do you stand on private use of your publicly available work?
I think it's just awesome, seriously, like, because that's the whole point of it anyway for me. So like if they find it inspiring and they're like, this is what I imagine it looking like, and I just think it's awesome, really. No problem at all with that.
The Rangdo of Arg, not the
Rangdo of Arg.
Not the Rangdu Farg.
The Rangdu
not the Rangdu Farg.
It was a good attempt.
I wasn't aware of this controversy, probably because I'm not on Twitter. No, somebody wants, unless they're, if they're violating somebody else's IP that I've created work for, I'm kind of, well, take it up with the IP holder, nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
But if it's not commercial, if it's just, we really like this picture, we wanted to kind of, I'd love to create my own RPG character around it, and I have occasionally asked somebody, people have come to me and said, would you mind if I do this? Ask for permission. When even though it isn't my permission to grant, it is lovely when it happens. It's very, it just means the work kind of lives on beyond its initial use. What it was commissioned for. People are inspired by it enough to want to actually bring it into their own gaming experience. That's just awesome. Yeah, I would not object to that at all.
Yeah,
as long as
it's
you're not
a bit
printing
of a random.
stuff,
I'm in almost exactly the same place. This is something that, because I do maps, I get quite a lot, because people use maps in almost all the role-playing games where they don't necessarily use art. They're inspired by art, and the art will take them down certain corridors, where most role players out there will often grab a map and say, we've gone from here to here. So I'll get comments asking things like, can I use this? Can I do this with this? Can I do that with that? And in most cases, it's not up to me because it's not my IP. I can just simply say, go and speak to somebody else, but I don't care.
Yeah,
go for it. Do whatever you want with it. That's great. That's super exciting. I'm really glad that you're inspired by this particular piece of work, and I'm really happy that you're getting joy in your life, because that's, from my perspective at least as a creator, just great to think that somebody out there is taking joy in the work that I put together. So there's that. However, I have seen on Twitter some people complaining because there were people of a different political persuasion to them using their art in what they felt was in an inappropriate fashion. So I've seen that, and I've seen people complain about it, and it's often been behind closed doors stuff, as in, we're over here doing our own thing, and you can't even see that thing. It's when it gets shared online and they try to associate your art with something that you don't feel it should be associated with. That's problematic. So if you're sharing your stuff, and it's not stuff that you can share, and it's not stuff that you have the right to use, and you're attaching to it some political leaning that is possibly not the creators, you're walking a very dangerous path. You're going along a cliff edge, which is going to potentially upset people, because we all know in this modern era, people get very upset about people who disagree with them, and they do love to shout about it all over the place. But if it's behind closed doors and I have no idea what's going on and it's never getting shared online, I really couldn't give one of those.
So the next question is from the indefatigable sea goat, who asks, out of everything you have produced so far, what is your favorite and why?
Yeah, that was tough. Because I could see the questions, but I have one on my in my portfolio that's just called the Worm Spawn, which is a creature from my IP, and I like that one a lot because it just sort of hit the mark of what I've been trying to achieve for a lot of years. Everything sort of just fell into place with that one, and it took a lot of years to, just to get the right amount of everything, like not too much, not too little, but it just fell into place there with that one, and so that one is special to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like most of the work I do. There's very little that I've done over the years that, for me, stands the test of time.
You're such a temperamental artist, Mark. Nothing's ever good enough. Everything can always be improved.
There's none of my art on the wall, because I just I don't like to look at it. The one exception is and I had this in my head when I took on the job. I thought, oh, I've got to do a really, really good job because this job is so cool. I want to hang the finished result on the wall, so it has to be better than I would do it normally. And that was a poster I did for Metallica. I can't mess this up. I can't mess this up. This has to be really, really good. And the poster is now hanging at the foot of my stairs. And every time I walk past it, I go, could have done better.
Well, Wolf Spin says to change that seed goat question about what do you enjoy drawing the most and why is it gnomes?
My answer for this one's super easy. Although I would also like to repeat everything that Mark just said regarding work. I don't like anything I do, while simultaneously feeling like it's great as I'm doing it, and then looking at it afterwards, go, I should have done that. I should have done that. I should have done that. And I've had to teach myself to finish work, as in, you're done now, pass it over to the client. And every single time I pass a piece of work over, I'm sitting there going, I could have done that. I could have done that. And they go, it's amazing. And I'm like, thanks. But is it? I'm not going to say, but is it? But is it? So for me, my favorite piece is on the wall. Wait a minute. And there's a reason why. It's this large map here. And it's not because the map itself is necessarily good. And trust me, I will tear it apart. It's because when it came in my career and what it meant for what I was doing. At that point, I had done a whole slew of Warhammer work. And that had been largely everything. I've been working for Black Library. I've been doing some stuff for their background books. I've been doing stuff for the role-playing game. I've been writing as well. And I got a ping from Chris Primus. Chris Primus, who, by the way, will be coming on our streams next month. If you have checked the little adverts at the beginning and the end. Nice plug. See what I did there? But I got a ping from Chris. And Chris said... the setting that I made that made our company, I want you to map it because everything you've done for Warhammer has really inspired me and I really would like your take on this. So I took their Freeport setting and I completely rejigged it. I got the book from them. I asked for every single last bit of text, went end to end, and then I found every single previous piece of work that had ever been written, including some parts written by Graham, who we all know. And loads of it was missing from the core map. It should have been on there and it just wasn't. And I rebuilt the entire thing and made that. And I sent it off and I said, will this do? Thinking, I really wish I'd done a bit more, being me. I really wish I'd added that. And the response I got was so uplifting, so pleasing. There's no other way to put it. They were so excited. Chris immediately printed it, slapped it up on his walls. They sent out the poster and they popped it out with their Kickstarter that they did for the new Freeport. Everybody went wild for it. And I just sat there going, really? Oh, sniffle. Oh. And then that's the one that I got my first Any award, a gold one for the mapping. And wow. And it just meant so much. And it's hanging off it up there. You can't quite see it. If I turn it up there, the little Any award is hanging off the top there. And that made me accept that what I found acceptable wasn't the same as what the rest of the world found acceptable. And I am so hypercritical of what I do. But it was that point where I had to just say, I'm wrong. I'm actually wrong. And my hypercriticism can only go so far before I have to say stop and move on.
I tell him that he's wrong all the time, but
frequently.
For some reason, it doesn't stick.
Just in general.
Yeah. So we've got a question from Patrick. Patrick, I feel this might be someone who knows you because they said, "Hey, man." So I'm feeling that this is directly at you.
One of my best friends.
Yeah, I figured.
Hey,
It was the
welcome.
K. It was the way Patrick was spelled. It's not the Scottish way. I have one question. How do you maintain being creative? I mean, what do you do to keep being creative? And how do you keep the fire from burning out? Or what, I think that's what he means.
Wow. That's a big one. Yeah, you can start, guys. I need to think a bit on that.
Okay, I was
Mark,
super long on my last one, so I'll do mine really short this time.
Okay.
I'm super lucky. I burn out and then reignite super fast. I burn and then drop, then burn, then drop, then burn, then drop. So I'm lucky in that regard. Also, I'm really lucky because I don't just do one thing. So if I'm burning out on, say, writing a thing, I can go to mapping a thing. If I'm burning out on mapping a thing, I can go to producing a thing. If I'm burning out on producing, I can go back to the layout and the mapping. And I've always got something else. And that, because of the way I go up and down so quickly, it allows me to keep that up all the way around in circles. So luckily for me, it's not an issue that I really face because I've found ways of getting around it. 10 years, 15 years ago, holy crap, it was a different set of affairs. I just learned to manage my crests and my peaks and my inevitable troughs.
What about you, Mark?
Similarly, I think to Andy's, is having a number of projects or different sort of creative disciplines on the go at the same time. So if you're feeling a little bit fried on one, you can go over and work on the other. But in terms of generally creative, I feel these days, whereas, when I was a younger artist, there was a sort of a thrill and an excitement to be creative. Now I'm an old junkie and I just do it to maintain, because the alternative is just terrible. So I'm driven to create because the consequences of not creating are just too horrible to contemplate.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can always do the emojis, Mark, when you get bored of the art.
Excellent point. Yeah, that was a new challenge, and it was like, okay, and do I like them? Some of them are all right. They're okay.
They're fine.
In horror when someone uses them in front of me.
But yeah, fuck, that one is so hard. I'm like you, Andy, where I go completely manic for 3 months or something, and then I have to sleep for a few days, and I don't know, but I don't know. I think a lot of the time it helps me to just focus on the process, and like I've really practiced learning how to enjoy the process of making something, because in the beginning it was a lot like the ugly stage where you like hate the painting for 80% of it, and then the last 20 you're like, this is turning into something. But I really hated to have that all the time, so I break it down into steps, and then I've made a process to make sure I enjoy each step. So I like the drawing, and I like painting, and I like, so it's so I think that helps me to actually enjoy the different steps of it, rather than just waiting for it to be done, because that just kills me. It has to be fun through the whole thing.
Yeah. I used to find that I used to really enjoy the when I was doing more traditional work, I would really enjoy the phase where I've gone from the rough sketch, and I haven't yet started the laborious business of sort of painting all in, but I'm just doing a really nice crisp line drawing of it. So I've answered all the questions in my head about what this is going to be, and I'm just kind of like nailing it down. That was always, for me, the sweet spot. These days, less of that. These days, there's a lot more of the agonizing and hating it. And then maybe at the end they go, yeah, that was all right.
That's all right, yeah.
On to the next.
I have a little extra to add to this one. I'm fully aware of my own failings when it comes to keeping myself enthused about work. And it's one of the reasons that I focused on maps, because when you do the first initial line drawing and sketches for a map, it looks like a black and white map that's almost good to go. When you then do the basic colors and put them in, it now looks a bit more like a shell shaded map. That's almost good to go. And then you can, if you want, go to the full painting of it, if that's the necessary next step, depending upon the nature of the piece at hand. And again, when you do that and you start to fill it in, it looks amazing. Zoomed up, not necessarily the whole thing. I'm very critical. So I'm quite good at keeping myself enthused because maps in particular have got actual steps that never really look, oh my God, I've got so much to fill in. It's all empty and I don't know what I'm going to do with that. It does, however, have an enormous number of boxes or an enormous number of tiny little pointy trees or anything similar. And they can be soul destroying.
You were telling me the other day about how many levels you typically have in a Photoshop map file, and it blew my mind.
Yeah, thousands.
Anything more than about 20, I get really jittery.
Yeah, that
thousands,
map there.
I couldn't imagine.
Yeah, that map up there, every single district is on its own layer. The houses, the outlines for them are a separate layer to the colouring, on a separate layer to the shading, on a separate layer to everything else. It means that if at any point someone says, oh, I need a map of this particular district, I can just uplift it, drop it down. With just that district, I can just have the buildings on it. I can just have the special buildings on it. It's because it's useful that I do that.
Right.
It means an enormous amount of work when you're going through the process, but it's mind-numbing work that's actually quite therapeutic. You can have a movie on, you can have some music on as you're working your way through it. It doesn't actually take a great deal of brain space. It's quite unlike, some of the maps have got, for example, something illustrative in the corner. You have to actually think to do that. You've got actual proper shapes and
we really
similar.
Need that map on a one screen. We really do. I tell you,
just lots of boxes.
Cartographer's corner. I've pitched it to Andy already. Yeah,
you did, and I think it's a great idea.
We will do that. I think as someone who lives with a creative person, there's a constant tightrope walk that you're on, and that is when they say, "Come and tell me what you think of this." Actually, a question that they want the answer to. Sometimes it is, or are they just doubting themselves and need reassurance? Sometimes it's that. Who knows?
Guilty.
Oh, bless. Thanks, Roderick. You're a creative person too.
Yes.
Yeah, I am.
Absolutely.
And Andy does get asked a lot about whether my stuff is acceptable. He's very much a critic, I have to say.
It's the truth.
The kids know that. Come to me for reassurance and come to their dad for
criticism.
Critique.
The hard truth of life.
Yep, absolutely.
So Jaleb asks, is there any particular art style you wish to have the opportunity to create in? And on the other end of things, are there any styles you try to avoid?
Yeah, for me. I still haven't done my Art Deco stuff that I really wanted to do. One of the things about my job is that a lot of it is replicating someone else's style. It's bizarrely uncreative sometimes because I'm often brought into, can you do a map like Tolkien? Can you do a map that looks like this other one that we've got because we want it to look as good for a set, but we want it to just look better. That's why we're hiring you now, because our first one just didn't look the way we want. So we now want you to come along and make it look like this. And it's an odd experience, but I've never done the Art Deco ones that I wanted to do because I think that would just look beautiful. It's something that sticks at the back of my mind that I'd always wanted to get round to. So for me, Art Deco. And there was a second part, wasn't there? Any style I try to avoid? No, actually, I quite enjoy the challenge of replicating anything. It's a fun part of cartography. I have never found one I haven't been able to replicate yet. And that's been exceedingly pleasing. So I've gone very technical, so it looks almost like an ordnance survey map. I've gone into the high fantasies of the Tolkien et al., and I've gone to very drawn ones. But my goal was to try and make sure that my work didn't look like it was my work for some of the maps, which is a very odd thing for someone who's creative and arty to do. But when I was first, for example, brought on for Warhammer, there was 2 existing maps already, and they wanted the next one to look like it was part of that set. So everybody thinks that I did the original maps because I did all the maps after that to that style. And everyone thinks that I did the original 2, and I didn't. I just didn't do the first Empire map, and it would have looked very different if I had. And I didn't do the Bretonian map. So there you go.
That's skillful.
What about yourself, Henrik?
No, I feel my style is like a combination of a lot of things I see and enjoy. So like if I see something that's more graphical and I enjoy that, I try to, I guess I interpret that, or bring that into what I do already. No, I just do my thing usually. And the styles that I try to avoid, like for example, what's called like the Riot style, where it's like very smooth and stuff like that. I don't enjoy that so much personally. I like to look at it, but I don't like to
Make it.
paint like that. Yeah, exactly. But I've also come to the, before it could also be a lot like, oh, I see someone do something, I'm, oh, I want to do that as well. But nowadays it's more like they can do their thing and I enjoy that, and I do my thing and they can enjoy, so it's changed a lot for me in that regard.
And what about you, Mark?
I mean, it's not particularly a style I haven't had the chance to create. But certainly styles that I want to do more of. I'm doing that with Rookery, which is stuff that's a bit more graphic, a bit more kind of stylized comic book stuff, which I've always had to sort of hold back on a little bit. Certainly with things like there was always that in my Warhammer work, but it was always sort of I had to tamp it down a bit. So I mean, I'm enjoying getting to really indulge that a little bit more and really kind of push that. And I want to make it more stylized, more graphic, more kind of impactful, less of the newly typical illustrative fantasy, and give it a bit more identity. So so I'm enjoying playing around with that. In terms of styles I try to avoid, I try to avoid it because I'm no good at it, and that's the sort of the sort of impressionistic, loose, sort of really heavy painterly stuff that we perhaps associate more with workshop these days. I have tried on a couple of times, but I just can't. I always have to get things in and sharp and crisp. I can't do that sort of gentle, loose sort of suggestion. It's got to be, no, it has to be something precise. I've got to draw it exactly. So every time I try to do the other, I've just been really disappointed. Even more so than I am usually.
Just add a little bit. That's my biggest issue. It's why I had to stop doing art almost entirely. I got caught up in the detail. I found it impossible to go painterly. It's why maps are so good, because they're just tiny details, just nothing but detail. So I could, with my little obsessive mind, just box my way across it, tree my way across a map, and that worked really well without the looseness at all. And whenever I'm asked to do a looser one, I've always got a bit of a okay.
I would agonize over it. If I haven't drawn that hand properly, I've just gone, oh, vague suggestive fingers. I'm like, no.
Where's its fingernails?
The pain. Oh my god.
So Seago asked, is there a single piece of art, writing, music that inspires you, which you go back to all these years later and still get inspiration? I think the Rooks might have answered this on another stream. And Seago quite wanted to hear Henrik's answer, but then we can go to the other Rooks and see.
I'll go for a different answer this time. Yeah.
All right. Well, I have one. I remember when I was 14, 15, there was a cover for a Swedish tabletop RPG that's called Drakar och Demoner, which means dragons and demons. And Paul Bonner made a cover for one called Snösaga. And I was like, that was the first time I sort of realized that someone is actually painting these, because for some reason you think they just appear. I hadn't even thought about someone painting them before, but I looked at them and I'm like, holy shit, how do you do that? And that one has followed me all these years. It's one of my favorite pieces, and so that one has been very special. And I think on a mental plane, I'm still playing catch up with Paul Bonner. In a way, I'm still trying to.
I think we all are, yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. That one is for sure for me.
What about the others? What do you think?
I think, last time I talked about music, didn't I? I talked about Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds.
Oh, yes, so you did.
In terms of art, if I can, the daily source of inspiration, I think you can see her up there. You can see her from the waist down. That's a 1972 Vampirella poster. And although I can't lift the screen high enough to show, she's judging me. She's pointing down at me with a bat on her finger, looking over everything I do, sneering at the work. So she's a constant source of inspiration up there.
I can't remember what you said last time, Andy.
Me? I said Hawkwind. I just took a ride in a silver machine. I'm going completely different this time. Yes, I did. I'm going completely different. Let's go art.
Yeah, don't do music.
Michael Whelan's Elric image, where the sword is plunged up in the air like so. It's green. It was used, I actually think, in the same roleplay game that Henrik just discussed. It was used as one of their covers in that one. Yeah, an old one. And that piece blew my mind when I was a kid, particularly because I like Michael Moorcock so much. I drew Elric many times. I had a 7.5-foot Elric on my wall that I painted.
Wow.
But that was painted in a Rodney Matthews style because I figured that I'd give that one a go. And holy crow, that was crazy because he's got a distinctive style, this good old Rodney Matthews.
I love him.
Yeah, me too. Gorgeous. And I popped that up on my wall. That was quite a thing. That was used by Games Workshop in the front of one of their Eternal Champions box sets. But Michael Whelan's piece in particular, when I was a kid, I was like, yes, that. And I never, ever got close to that because my own personal taste when I drew was so very different. So when I attempted to replicate that, it would take me, years, literally forever, because I was worrying about every last detail where for him, it was like a paintbrush stroke and it did everything that was required of me. I'll get myself the finest brush I can. No. just no. So there you go. That's one that I can look at and get a big smile on my face. I'll put a link in it in Discord later, just in case anybody doesn't know the image. Because
it's been used for album covers and stuff like that as well.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
All over the place.
Everywhere.
It's so good. Such
amazing.
Good piece.
Yeah, good piece.
I was always inspired by, we used to go on holiday to a cottage near Loch Tummel, and one of the walls in the cottage was wallpapered with a map of Loch Tummel, which this tells you a lot about how I ended up with a cartographer for a husband. And the dad of the family who owned the cottage had, when Loch Tummel had been flooded, when they had built a hydroelectric dam, he had redone the map because he was an architect, had with the new outline of Loch Tummel. And then on the other wall, there was a map that the son in that family had made of the whole area that we used to like go on holiday in, but it was like in a Tolkien style. So everything was named. There was like Once Island, which is sometimes an island and sometimes not, and Death Valley, where we always used to find dead sheep. And it really inspired me.
Wow.
And at home on their wall, he had a map that he had done of like Tolkien's world. And he didn't end up being a cartographer, this person. He ended up being a forester. But that was one of the first inspirations, because that family was much older than me. So he's like 10 or 15 years older than me. So I was a really little kid. Inspired me to think about how the fantasy overlaps with the real, and how you can just create anything in your mind and overlay it on if you've got that. And that was when I was starting to roleplay as well. And so the combination of those things, like the ethereal nature of the Scottish Highlands, plus those maps, plus little Lindsay, kind of took me to another place.
Amazing.
Yeah, I like that one.
So what have we got next? Seagoat asks, in fact, there's one from Zoltan first that I think we'll go to first. Where is Zoltan?
The Golden Rook?
The Golden Rook. He's somewhere up
here.
The
Golden Rook.
Yeah.
The Golden Rook.
Everyone take a moment. He's Golden Rook.
Look, he's even got yellow on his
Your shininess.
Speaking of colour, any preference between colours or black and white art? And then there's a specific question for you, Henrik, afterwards.
I mean, I like both a lot, actually. It's more about how, I don't know, I just see it as, two different necessary things, really.
Yeah, this is the follow-up question. A lot of your work is beautifully rendered in colour, and when Mark Gibbons saw that question, he was like, that must be for Henrik.
Yeah. That's colour very well.
Yeah. Do you prefer to work in colour or leave your work in line art shading? I'd still go back, Mark, though, to your beautiful Morathi for the 1997 Games Workshop calendar, a vision in purple.
Our burlesque Morathi.
Yeah.
No, I like both a lot, actually. I think line art / shading, just it's a bit more like it's a bit fewer elements to keep in your head, so it can be very relaxing to just draw, like I do for Free League right now. I'm just like tons and tons of drawings of creatures, and I don't have to worry about colors or anything. It's just, it's so relaxing sometimes. But then if you're in the headspace to, use color, and you can really, when you really come up with something juicy, then it's very special. But I feel those are further in between, really, for me, like where I feel really happy with the color piece. But yeah, I like both a lot.
Yeah, for me, it's black and white. I think because that's sort of where I really cut my teeth, as a black and white illustrator. It's still somewhere I feel more comfortable. Occasionally, I'll do a color piece that I think, I've got it right. This is sort of close to a decent, color composition. I've got everything sits nicely together. But part of the reason that with Rookery, we're doing it all, stripping it all down to not exclusively black and white, but that's kind of like the main drive is partly because I really like that. It's a throwback to the RPG books of 20, 30 years ago, which I think is nice to step away from the all singing, all dancing, full color stuff. And it allows me as an artist to create something that's sort of really sort of striking and graphic. So yeah, for me, I'll take black and white every time, really.
Some Seagoat says some of Henrik's work in colour you can get lost in, and there's a lot of love for the Scottish wilderness in the comments. A fantasised map of the Kyle of Butte and Oban and points north for me. So there you go.
So I have a slightly different view in this one. You tend to find that if I have to do, say, 20 black and white pieces as maps, they are going to end up being all very, very similar. There's much less chance to express freedom of creativity when you're doing the mapping side, because it tends to be a bunch of fixed shapes, a bunch of fixed locations, where there's very little in the way of creative freedom. So if you're doing it in black and white, you tend to find that unless you've got a particular style that sings, it's just lots of straight lines and curves. And it very quickly becomes dull to create. So color mixes that up completely, because you've now got layers and splashes and all manner of stuff. Plus, when you go color, you've got a host of contrasts that you can add that in black and white are tougher to do on maps, because you need to make sure that particular areas stand out for one reason or another when it's a map. And they all have to be immediately recognizable from a glance. That bit is this, that bit is that bit is this. With color, that's much easier. With black and white, much harder, because it just all sort of fades into the page, particularly if it's a detailed area that you're creating. A detailed black and white map can be very confusing. So ensuring that you get a method of making that sing, and then also doing 20 of them, can be not just a challenge to the page, but a challenge to the mind to make sure that you can put your way through all of that. So color is often for maps a more exciting prospect because it's easier, even though it takes more work, but it's much easier to get a very strong final piece. Black and white, you have to have a strong style, like a big scrapey ink brush going across and giving an idea that it's not just the map, it's also a piece of art. That changes things before it starts to turn into 40 maps later, I'm ready to just stop.
Yeah, no, that's feeling for sure.
Roderick says, I've already talked about how much I was hooked into All My Future Nerdery by Mark's Full Colour and then an acronym. Like I've already explained.
He did this on purpose.
I have a mind blank for acronyms. KBT.
KBT. What's KBT? Oh, someone save us.
So I don't know. I should know that, shouldn't I, really?
You're going to have to put Corn Berserker. How is on earth you going to know it's a Corn Berserker Terminator? I know the one you mean, though.
Oh, that's a tricky one. Yeah, I would not have got that one. Well, thank you very much. Thanks very much. Very kind of you to say. Yeah, that was one of the, at the time, funny enough, it's kind of like what Paul Bonner was going through previously at Workshop, in that he was employed primarily as an internal black and white artist. So Paul, he did a couple of very famous, well, one particularly very famous oil painting as a color piece to sort of get it out of his system a little bit and demonstrate that, no, he could do stuff in color. And the same thing was with me with that Terminator was another example of that, where I work in black and white. So as a freelance piece in my spare time, I painted that Terminator. So yeah, and it was kind of, you didn't get to do a lot of it because obviously there's an awful lot more demand at the time for internal black and white illustrations than cover pieces. So you try to sort of nudge somebody at the studio and say, hey, can you hire me to do a freelance piece? Same thing with the Orcs, the second edition of the Orcs cover. That was a freelance piece. I didn't do that in-house. Just because the politics of the studio was sort of delicate. So I was gainfully employed filling up the pages.
Huh. There you go. I want to pull out in this one, in the case be more critical of your own work because you know the bits you rushed, or the bits that are missed out, particularly with maps. I'll give a single example. I did a big map of the Reichland, and I intended for certain details to be on that map, but they never hit. And they never hit because I didn't have time. It was a very short turnaround on the piece. And I wanted to do a host of glaciers that were moving down through the mountains because that really shows that they're high. And it just adds that extra layer of, ooh, that's big, and then drop some extra clouds in there as well, which would be a nice little graphical element. They were never there. And every time I look at that map, all I see is big empty areas that should have things. And it just frustrates me. I just look at it and go, it's a stupid map. I hate that map. And yeah, there you go. So Executor, spot on.
Yeah, that was way up in the stream, but I missed it on the way through, so I just went up and asked, and grabbed it out. So yeah, do you rush? Is that why you would be critical of your work, Mark? I don't feel that would be for you.
No, I don't know that I rush anything. Well, if I do rush something, that would probably mean that a bit of it won't be as good as it should be, and it won't be the rushing that'll bother me. It'll be the bit looking at the finished piece and seeing nothing but the flaws. So I mean, whatever's caused that, I drew a foot badly. Somebody looks a bit cross-eyed. You know what I mean? Or I didn't think through the armor designs or the weapon. I could have done a better take on those, which is ultimately what you end up seeing when you look at your stuff. It's nice now if I do, if I am digging through an old portfolio for something and I come across a piece to go, oh no, that one, I got everything right. It's nice when it happens. So I know it can happen, just that it doesn't happen very often.
My favorite piece of 40k art is one of yours. It's the Dark Angels Interrogator Chaplain. I've mentioned that before.
Yes,
on the t-shirt.
No,
you hate it?
It's terrible. The robes are so badly rendered.
Love it.
But that's also fun how you get stuck in those like details, because that's also something I realized where there's like a little bag or something under an arm, and I'm like, oh, it's so bad, and no one will ever see it or even ever put their focus on that particular detail.
But it's there, right?
Yeah, I
totally.
know. It's so frustrating sometimes.
On that Interrogator Chaplain, it's also my mum's favorite piece of Mark Gibbons' art. She has the t-shirt. She has the t-shirt.
The mother's favorite.
The mother's favorite. Yes, she has the t-shirt, and it inspired her to make the actual helmet, and so she made a full-size version of it. There you go.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
So there you go. So for all you don't like it, Mark, it gets out there, and that's the thing that I had to learn, and that map up there really taught me it.
When we go up to in November to Thurso, we should take some pictures of that helmet.
If it's not that helmet. That's a different one that she made later. Yeah, the one that one I think went to Games Workshop. Sadly, I think the retail division took that one in the end, and it went into their office there. Retail. Yeah, bloody retail. I know.
Paul Bonner is the black and white artist that you've got some stuff off, isn't he, Andrew?
Me? No.
Some of the originals?
No. That's Anthony Reynolds. And I have Anthony Reynolds' original Fimmer piece, actually, the very first Fimmer ever painted. I have that up there. I'll bring it out one day. It's a fun little thing to look at. But no, I don't have any.
What is on the wall behind you to the right?
That's also an Anthony Reynolds piece. Yeah.
There you go.
Tony. Yeah, totally. So what's next? Sorry, I got completely confused there.
I'm just going to. Oh, here's a little question from Martin, which is a reference to something that he put in an acronym. So it did take me a few moments to work out what it was. What is your favorite color? Yes, that is a reference to Monty Python.
It's not on your screen.
Oh, sorry. There we go. Thanks.
There we go.
What is your favorite color? Quite an appropriate question to ask some artists.
Random.
I like the red spectrum of it, just because I don't know. It's like with the purples and oranges, you could do some really nice hue shifts. I don't know. I really love that corner of it really. So that's red, I think.
I'm a bit more specific. I'm going to say black cherry.
Ooh,
Black
Just the
cherry.
colour for
Good
a car.
colour,
Yeah,
though.
black cherry.
I
Yeah,
can
the
see it
cool
now.
colour to see on a car and stuff like that. Yeah, something about that colour, that deep sort of slightly purple. Again, red again, right? But that deep, ordinarily black, purpley red is sexy.
I've got two. I've got my favorite actual color, which is purple, and deep purples really do it for me. I really like that color. But in terms of working with, because so much of my work involves green and brown, so much of it involves green and brown, and greys, but often with green and brown undertones, that moving out of those and moving out of yet another sea green really gets me going sometimes. So having the opportunity to depict something that's really very different, so things that aren't necessarily colors, really stark whites are really quite fun, which is not necessarily something you'd normally consider as a standard color to work with, because often it's the white page in front of you, but for me it's often the brown page, and what helps make the details ping, and yet another brown page. Yeah, it really is. And sometimes it can be quite unpleasant. Oh, the brown page. How did it get there? Yeah.
The brown page.
I've got a question that I've just grabbed from Discord from Susan Henny, Yukimi, but I've just condensed it down because I was just typing it. So I'll read out the longer one here. In reference to the answers given to the puzzling briefs, I realise I don't know what RPG illustrators are paid for specifically. That is, are RPG illustrators paid for successfully providing the commission or remit, as it were, or are you paid for each attempt or something else?
See, it feels like it varies so much, but yeah, mostly the attempt, I feel.
Yeah, I'm going to come on this one relatively strong. I've been responsible for drafting quite a number of contracts, different types of contracts that work around this. And generally the pressure is always from the company that's looking for the contract to be drafted to not pay for work that they don't want. And when it comes to artists, that can sometimes be not just unfair, it can be completely wrong, because the person who's doing the commissioning didn't know what they wanted. And you have to accommodate for that, or you're going to end up with an awful lot of upset artists out there. Because sometimes a piece just doesn't work. And that's not the artist's fault. That's not necessarily the commissioner's fault sometimes. It's just the piece didn't work. And to then say to the artist, I'm not paying you for that at all, is to me a crime. It's now, if the artist for one reason or another hasn't done the job, there should be a kill clause written into the contract that explains exactly what happens. That should be nice and clear in black and white in the contracts, but you tend to find, particularly in the RPG industry, which is an industry that's run by, in many cases, hobbyists, people who don't necessarily understand what it's like to even be an artist or a creative, where that next bill really can make an enormous difference. And then taking a week out of their life or 2 weeks out of their life to work on a project for you, only to have you say, actually, that's not quite what I want, and then not to pay? No. Yeah, it's just wrong. So if anyone out there is an artist, really all I can say is look at your contracts, and if you feel that there's an issue there, ask. This is one thing that a lot of people don't do, and I query pretty much every contract that hits my desk, to the point that I have caused problems on more than one occasion, because if there's something missing in my contract, I'll call it out. I'll say, this is missing. I either want it in, or I want you to say that it doesn't matter, and I want that very clearly stated, and why it doesn't matter. I have had issues with contracts in the past, and I have made sure that I'm always covered. That's why, though, I make sure I'm always covered. So when I moved to the other side and I was commissioning other people, it was something that I was exceedingly on, regardless of what the individual company may have preferred. I will always ensure that there's proper contracts put in place for the contract having to come to an end for one reason or another.
I'm glad you explained that, because otherwise it just sounds threatening.
It does.
Kill contract.
Oh, kill! Yeah, I mean,
kill clause.
I could talk to that as well, because what often happens with an illustration is you'll agree on the fee, and then the client will have usually like two rounds of revisions that you are contractually obliged to make the tweaks. And they could be little tweaks, they could be huge tweaks. You have no control over the volume, but if they only have 2 occasions on which to present the range of tweaks that they like. If at the end of that you still haven't satisfied them, then it's the kill fee, which is usually like maybe 50% of what you said you do originally, and then they got to go and find themselves another artist because they can't. If they paid you a kill fee, they can't use your art. That's it. They killed you. It's gone. If I'm doing concept art, I try and negotiate a daily rate rather than per piece, because it's it's kind of like you're devoting your energies and your brains to solving their problems. So that's what you are as a concept artist. You're a problem solver. So it's much easier to go pay me per day, and we'll see how many days it takes to get where we need to be. Because if it's per piece with concept art, it's just so vague. You don't know. You might hit it first time. Brilliant, great. If that's the case, it might take you 20 goes. If they're paying you for one finished design, you have no idea how to gauge that. Whereas if it's just pay me for the day, and we'll see how we go.
That's really interesting. And we should hold that thought and come back and do a stream on concept art at some time in the future.
And maybe even contracts as well.
Yeah. Maybe not for Inside.
Not for us. Yeah, but there's definitely something about that area.
It's the D&D for freelancers, concepts and contracts. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. It sounds like such a delightful stream.
Big editor boss in the final room, you know.
Andy and I had a comic that we started, which was exactly that. It was a party of D&D adventurers who'd got trapped in the real world and had to like work in an office. And every week they would try to get back to like Fantasyland, but they couldn't. We called it like offices and overseers or something. We had all the characters, but then Andy's computer got dropped and died, and we lost it. But I loved that.
Thanks for bringing that back.
Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, we have come to the end of our stream, so all that remains is to say thank you so much to Henrik, our guest, for coming on. Thank you, Henrik. Andy, to our Iron Rooks, who I think you have there.
Oh, great! I give that to you. Have you not got the names to ping up? Please ping that up.
Hang on a moment.
If you don't, I can do it myself because I've got it over here. So let's first start off with right at the top, the Iron Rooks. We've got a Patreon tier called Iron Rooks, where if you join our Iron Rooks, we will say thank you because you're the best. So let's call them out. First is Executor, who we talked to earlier in the stream, which was lovely. We've got Jack Hayes, we've got Cosmonaut, which I'm going to pronounce as Cosmonaut, even though it's a K and a 0 and a 5 and an M and a 0 and there's numbers. That's what that one is. I don't know what that is. Mark DeGino, thank you very much. And Samuel Cooper, they are our Iron Rooks. And right at the very top, let's do a quick call out for our Golden Rook. Took our forelocks. Nicholas Taylor. If anyone else joins as a Golden Rook, he's going to be completely gutted because he'll no longer be the Golden Rook.
I think they have to fight it out, so there can be only one.
I was going to say there can be only one.
There can be only. There will be swordplay afoot. So that's a call out for them. In terms of the credits, at the end of our show, we always have the Golden Rook's name added there. Plus, anyone who joins our Patreon at any point will get a call out on the week that they join. So if you stay on for the credits here, you'll see there's a bunch of names for the people who joined this week. Thank you very much, everyone. You're the best. And if you do enjoy what we're doing, then please do pop over to our Patreon, which I think will probably be their Patreon. And even if you only drop £1, that makes an enormous difference to us. So please, if you like what we do, just drop £1. You're the best. I have now done my shilling. Whew.
Brilliant.
Makes me feel a bit dirty. Just a little bit. But at the same time, give me the pounds.
Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and we'll see you soon. As Andy says, stick around for the credits to see what's coming up in October.
Oh, yeah, good stuff.
Bye.